How long do parrots live? And does that mean that you should think twice about getting a parrot? Hi. I was going to say, hi guys, I'm Kaylin, the author of The Parrot Bliss Bond, and we are hiding from the rain in our front lanai. This is Ursulus, my Mexican redhead or green cheek conure or red crown, conure, Amazon. I think I still have my conure on my mind. And we're talking about how long parrots live. I'm going to try not to make this video too long because, sometimes when a video is long, that's good. A lot of times, I don't know, So, here goes. Ursulus, how long are you going to live? You don't know? That's strange. I don't either. It is said that parrots live, depending on the species, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, even 100. Here's the funny thing. I don't understand where people get that number. The reason I don't understand is because we haven't had parrots, and I'm speaking specifically in the U.S., for more than 50 years. In the 1970s, we started to really, parrots became more popular, and we started to import them, really import them. There was some detective show, and I think the detective had a Mullican cockatoo, and that just everybody wanted a Mullican cockatoo, not realizing that they are super Velcro. They need a lot of attention. They are one of the most social parrots, and they are loud, 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 loud. So everyone, wanted a parrot, and, everyone got a parrot, I guess. Here's the thing, though. A couple things that don't add up for me. Number one, if someone got a parrot 50 years ago, like in the 1970s, it was wild caught. In other words, it was caught in the wild and imported, and then people bought it, and they had to tame it. In a way, taming a parrot today is nothing in comparison to what it used to be. Taming a parrot today who was hand-fed is very different. Once a parrot has been hand-fed, and if they're hand-fed, when they start to open their eyes, it's sort of an imprinting thing where at a young age they get used to humans, so they bond with humans. They learn early on not to fear humans. In the wild, the parents teach that, you want to avoid these things called people or whatever, and it's kind of like the opposite lesson. So if a parrot was wild caught, taming it would be so much harder, and it's just never going to be the same because a parrot, take two parrots, African greys, because that's my example for tonight. You take two African greys, one that's hand-fed and raised in captivity and one that's caught in the wild. The one in the wild has already been conditioned, and the perception is already set that they're supposed to be with their flock, they're supposed to be with, their own species, and they intuitively know, or their parents teach them who to avoid, what animals, that kind of thing. Whereas when they are born in captivity, it starts to change. I think that the process of domestication comes about as it is that you go from one generation to the next generation that's born in captivity. For example, my parrotlets, which at this point are all born in captivity, when I got my first parrotlets and they had babies, I noticed that not the first ones, but my second generation, my third generation, they know, they seem to know more intuitively that as a person I'm not so bad, that, I'm a little more trustworthy, that kind of thing. And to me, it's a lot of it, if nothing else, is simply the fact that the parents I hand raised, so they recognize me. And they might not be totally bonded to me, that kind of thing. They might not even really be bonded to me. But when they're in their nest box and I'm checking on their babies and I'm checking on them and I'm feeding them every day, they're seeing me and they're not freaking out. They're not sending a message to their babies, danger, danger, danger. It's more like maybe caution, maybe not. Some of my parrotlets that I hand raised, when they had babies, they were fine when I put my hand in and pet them, pet the hen while she's sitting with their babies, picked up a baby. The domestication, if that's what you want to call it, or the process of shifting the perception to perceive me as someone who is safe definitely happened. I think that's really interesting. So that means that an African gray that was caught in the wild and that was brought into this country, you would never know the age, because experts will tell you that they can't tell the age. When they're young, they can go, oh, this one's young. But after they've crossed a line from being a juvenile, it gets really hard to tell. You can probably tell if a parrot's super, super old, but otherwise it's really hard to tell. So that means that if someone's really bonded with their parrot, either they did an incredible job of taming them, or their parrot is really less than 50 years old because it was originally imported and bred. Like the parents were maybe imported and then they were bred. And so now they were hand raised. If a parrot was hand raised, it can't be more than 50 years old. Like at the most, I don't even think it's really going to be 50. It took a while for breeders to learn how to breed African grays. Like they had theories. At first their theories were like, put them in a dark little place, or they kind of had to figure everything out. The next thing is like, because I looked on a social group somewhere and someone happened to ask, which was very fortuitous for me, how old is your African gray? And people were like 30, some were younger, but 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and I'm going, how in the world could their parrot be 70? How could they know, and how could their parrot be 70? Back 50 years ago, people fed them seed-based diets, which is like, first, you know what? Forget whether seeds are like all and only a seed-based diet is healthy or not. You can't really just eat one thing and really be healthy. Pellets are a little different because it's like a complete food. But even, experts will even tell you, you really have to give them vegetables. You have to give them some variation. You have to give them some micronutrients. So, they only gave them seeds. And so I can't really imagine that the first parrots that were brought lived that long. But even if they did, they weren't really tame. So I'm sitting here going, the math isn't adding up. I don't understand how people are saying how long parrots live when I don't think there's really much to base that number on. It doesn't seem like they've been exporting parrots for that long. I mean, yes, they export parrots a long time ago, and I've talked about this before. Like, it used to be something that kings and queens and emperors were gifted. But that was like one parrot, maybe it wasn't 100 parrots, but let's say it was 100 parrots. My point is, it went to the emperor. It didn't go to you and I. You and I couldn't go down to a local bird store and either have one shipped to us to our local airport or go and just get one. That just didn't happen. So it was just a select few people who had them, kind of thing. They weren't really, at least in the U.S., imported until the 1970s. So what is the age number based on? And I am interested to know. And mind you, I am not saying that anyone's right and anyone's wrong. I'm not saying that people are lying about how old their parrot is. I'm saying it's not adding up for me. That doesn't resonate with me. I understand that sometimes people think something, and I don't think they're necessarily lying. And I'm not looking at that process, and I'm not guessing at what's going on there. I'm just saying when people say that, that doesn't resonate with me. My mentor has done talks, and he also wrote the foreword to my book. That's Tony Silva, and he said to me, parrots live about 50 years. There's no real documentation. And when he says something like that, like he means he's looked in like museum archives, like he knows that he has not found real documentation that's going to make you say, scientifically we have proof that they live that long. So where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is, you've probably heard me before, if you're not new to my channel, say, you don't know how long your parrot's going to live. And sometimes people will post to me or comment to me and say, oh, my parrot passed away, I want to get a new parrot. And the people aren't 150 years old looking for a new parrot. They're not necessarily 80 years old looking for a new parrot. In other words, their parrot didn't live 100 years. I could tell. I just had someone say to me, I love this question, if you were going to get one parrot, what's a good constant companion? And I'm like, Fun question. Price range? And he said, and I said, a really good one is a cockatiel. And he said, well, I had a cockatiel and it lived, I forget if he said 7 or 9 years, and then it passed away. Do I think that parrots are all going to perish quickly? No. Do I think that in captivity, parrots could really, theoretically, have a longer lifespan? Absolutely. There's no predators. There's no days where they can't find food because if you're taking care of your parrot, you're always giving them a good, healthy diet, I hope. Idealistically speaking. And so actually in captivity, a parrot should live longer. But I go to my vet and, and I'm like, where did she get this Clostridium? And she's like, it's in the air. I'm like, oh, for the love of spaghetti. How can I keep my parrot safe from the air? I don't want them to get sick. And, that's gotten better. It's actually, it was a cockatiel baby, and she's like, cockatiel babies always get sick. They're very prone to Clostridium, but they're prone to getting sick, and it's like, oh my goodness. But anyway, my point is, they get sick just like we do. If you think about it, do you know how long you're going to live? No. And when my daughter was just born, they were saying that the lifespan for her generation was like 100 years. But now there's like an epidemic of both obesity and diabetes, and they're reducing the lifespan. Like they're saying that here in the States, people aren't going to live as long. But that doesn't have anything to do with me. I think a really important question is, are you taking care of yourself? Are you eating a good diet? Do you exercise or do whatever it is that makes you healthy so that you can take care of your parrot? I think that's a really important question. To me, whether you are 10 years old and you're going to get a parrot because you can take care of them for 100 years, or you're 80 years old and you're getting a parrot and you're not going to be able to take care of them for 100 years, I think what's more significant is the care that you do give them. It's kind of like a relationship, a romantic relationship. You may have found just the absolute opposite. If you're Romeo, you're Juliet, or whatever you want, and that, and they could walk out and get struck by lightning, and that could be the end of it. You just have no guarantees. You just don't know. You have to, I think, live your best life every day. So, how long do parrots live? The best reliable information I can find is 50 years. If you have something reliable that says differently, I would love to hear about it. But I don't consider hearsay like, well, this person said. I think there's always exceptions, but there's centenarian, there are humans who live to be over 100 years old. Like, for example, I think it's the island of Okinawa. They have like the most centenarians, I think is the correct word. But it doesn't mean that everyone's going to live to be 100. It means that they've got this fluke, and so they've been focused scientifically, they've been studied, they've been documented, that kind of thing. It doesn't mean that's the average. So if you have like some hardcore, real information, I would love to hear about it. If you have a bird who's over 50 years, I would love to hear about it, and I would love to hear like what your documentation is, because unless you're older than that, how do you know how old the bird really is or how long they've been around, right? In other words, if you weren't around, you would have to be getting that information from someone reliable, kind of thing. And maybe you grew up with the bird, and I've seen people say that, it was my parents' bird and they bequeathed it to me, but it passed away. It doesn't. The bird was old. It was beyond the 50 years, but in other words, it wasn't living 2 generations. That would be quite incredible. So, how long do they live? I think at best 50 years, depending on the species. I also think that birdie drop-ins happen, and I've had bad experiences. I'm sure you have too. No one gets to live forever. Everyone, all the birds, everyone's going to expire. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know if would you want to live forever? Yeah, well, maybe that could be the topic of another video, huh? But do I think that should stop you from getting a parrot? No. If you're concerned about your age, I think you should consider a rescue, or consider a parrot that's looking to be rehomed. There are plenty of parrots that at this point would love to have the incredible bond that they can have when they bridge. I love talking about the bridging of their parrot world and their human world. Not a crossing where now they're on an island and they're lost because they're getting island fever and they lose their parrotness. Not an island, a bridge. And I think the best way to bridge is to make sure that you have at least 2 parrots, preferably 2 of the same species. There are exceptions. Sometimes they really bond with another parrot. And I find that that has nothing to do with whether or not they bond with you. I find they still really will bond with you if you spend time with them. Time is a magic ingredient with the parrots because in the wild, of course, parrots are flock animals and they are with their flock all the time. Thank you for joining me in this video. Thank you for watching commercials. That is how I keep making my videos and feed my flock. If you have any questions about parrots, if you have any great articles, great scientific data on how long parrots live, I would love to hear about that. Otherwise, you know, it's like I don't get it. We just haven't even had parrots, at least in the U.S., for more than 50 years. So clearly, there's some parrots that have been here longer, but not a whole lot of them, like not most of them. So I'm curious about that. But right now, my observation is, I think 50 years is a golden ticket. There are exceptions, but there's exceptions both ways. Some of them just don't live near that long. Making it through their babyness, like from when they hatch, the first 3 days, you wouldn't believe how vulnerable they are. And then like the first, depending on the species, right, the first whatever you want, the first couple months, and then the first year or 2 until they're an adult. When they're an adult, it's kind of like us. Then they're pretty strong and stable. Like it's almost like the systems work things out. But when they're young and they're little, just like a human baby, you got to be like extra careful and you just bend over backwards for them to make sure that they make it, because there is like no way they're going to live 1 year if they're not properly taken care of at the beginning. So, you know, it's just the same as everyone. And at home, hopefully we're really, really taking great care of them. Now I'm getting repetitive, so I will catch you next time. Have a wonderful evening.